How's it going, everyone? I'm Thor Retzlaff. I'm here at my home in Olympic Valley, California, and here to do a little bit of a recap of our latest film launch, Full Circle, directed by my best friend and business partner, Erich, with my brother Thor Retzlaff, who is the director of photography, and Rafael Pease, another good friend, and he led the local logistics charge as well as being our translator, which was super helpful along that trip. But yeah, I'm here to talk about my personal experience on one of the most all-around epic adventures I've been on thus far in my life, as well as I have a little bit of gear just right here, just to show and share. I don't have all of it. A lot of it's just really trashed and absolutely thrashed and smells really, really bad. So yeah, I just have a couple items here just to show and talk about a little bit about what we brought and how the whole experience was for me personally. And yeah, I guess it all really started when we were in college. Erich and I were randomly paired as college roommates in 2012, and we both played a couple sports at Lewis and Clark. We both played football, and then I did baseball and he did track. So we had that in common, but we also really loved adventure and creating some different stories together. So yeah, and then fast forward a couple years, we both studied abroad our junior year of college. Erich went to Italy, and then I went to Australia. And I remember when I got back, I hadn't really seen the film 180 Degrees South before, but Erich showed it to me, and I think it absolutely had a huge impact on the way we were viewing a lot of different things. And I know it had impacted Erich's life earlier on when he watched it as a kid. And yeah, it turned into one of those routines through senior year. I think we watched it probably 10, 11 times. It was like a Sunday afternoon thing where we'd either watch 180 Degrees South or Hot Dog, honestly, one of those old ski movies. But it was definitely one of those pivotal kind of moments where the philosophy and the film journey of Jeff Johnson doing this amazing adventure and a little bit of the philosophy around seeking adventure to find your purpose really hit home to us, and it allowed us to think of different experiences and a fresh perspective on experience and memories and friendships and relationships and all of these different things compacted into one, and ultimately what we wanted to do with our life. So that was my first real experience with the inspiration that 180 Degrees South passed down to us. And yeah, that inspired a whole lot of adventures. And then fast forward to 2019 in the fall, I had just gotten off a boat, the Pangaea, after supporting explorers Mike Horn and Borge Ausland on mission number 1 of their North Pole crossing, where we started in Nome, Alaska, and jumped on Mike's Pangaea, an amazing sailboat. And we sailed up to 85 degrees 34 minutes north, where we dropped the two explorers, Mike and Borge, off to begin their ski across the North Pole, or across the Arctic Ocean via the North Pole. And yeah, no, that was an insane expedition in itself. And we got out of the ice, sailed through the Northeast Passage into Svalbard, Norway. But then right when I landed in Oslo, I got a call from Erich. I was actually waiting for my bags in the baggage carousels, and I got a call from Erich, and they had just finished the first successful winter ski descent of another big volcano down in Chile called Tupungato, another film that's coming out by Rafael. And yeah, he was just super stoked, super hyped. I hadn't had service for about a month, and neither did Erich, but while they're on the latter part of their expedition, or during their expedition on Tupungato, they're talking about another projects in Chile, and then Corcovado was brought up in conversation, and I know Erich could speak more to it, but yeah, they were talking about that Rafa had attempted a first snowboard descent of Corcovado a couple years back, but really got held up into the jungle after just a couple days, and it just got really logistically challenging, and there's really so many unknowns that they turned around. And this was one of those wild opportunities where in 180 degrees south, Corcovado is one of those kind of monumental volcanoes in Patagonia. And yeah, it was one of those moments where Erich called me, and I was so hyped on like just the energy put forth in the conversation, and it was kind of a no-brainer. I was absolutely, I'm 100% in. This sounds like one of the craziest stories, and hence the title, Full Circle. We watched that in, my first time watching it was in kind of the last years of college, but it was one of those really wild moments where you're able to go attempt something that was like, seemed like it was only footage back in the day. So I'm pretty sure I had a couple days in Oslo. I slept for about 70 hours straight, and then went to Oktoberfest in Munich for about a week, drank some beer, and then flew home to Lake Tahoe to meet up with my brother Thor. And we only had 2 days before we flew down to Chile, and we did a whole gear spread, grabbed all of our ski equipment, camera equipment, any extra food, ice climbing equipment, everything we can get, and any other, any other items that we could find that we needed to bring down. And next thing you know, with a super quick turnaround in Tahoe, we were already en route to Santiago. And once we got down there, the adventure was really just starting to build and build and build. We picked up some last minute things in Santiago, including a really wild and unusual kind of item where it was coming to pick up machetes, trying to find which one we could use for the jungle section, because we knew that we needed them. We knew how dense, or we had an idea of how dense everything was. Which we could only really assume at that moment. But it took us going to 15 different stores and markets and just trying to find anyone who sold machetes, but we couldn't find a single person. And then on like the 15th round, we were in this mall and ended up going to the very bottom floor out in a corner, and there was this old gentleman with this tiny little shop. And he surprisingly had a few machetes, and we're like, no, this is insane. Like, this is our only option. We leave pretty much tomorrow. So we went and picked up, I actually have one right here that we kept as more of a souvenir. So this is one of the machetes that we got from that shopkeeper. It's pretty much brand new. I think pretty much only cut bread with it so far here at the house. But this was made in Brazil, a Tramontina machete, and this is the one actually Erich chose, which one he picked out, and a version of that. And there was a bunch of different types of machetes, and genuinely didn't really know. Kind of, there's off-brand versions. There's obviously some different, maybe tourist ones. But yeah, we picked up our machetes and started the adventure. And that night we did a huge gear spread, just double checking all our equipment. We were planning for 7 days out on that trip. And next, Rafa organized a ride with a car called the Waz, and we drove 8-9 hours south to meet up with a ferry and continue that build and that anticipation for what was one of the most all-around, really wild adventures I've been on thus far in my life. So once we were on the ferry, we pretty much, we spent the night, actually. It was I don't even remember how many hours we were on that ferry for, but we woke up at sunrise and we saw the first glimpse of Corcovado, and it was absolutely spectacular. Just this immaculate just work of art out in Patagonia. And obviously there's this long, dense green jungle as the approach, and we were all just staring at it, and it was just beautiful, beautiful day. Bluebird, and it was warm, just absolutely spectacular. Right when we got off the ferry, we were immediately met by some local fishermen who had a tiny little boat, and we grabbed all of our gear off the Waz and out of the Waz and totally packed this little boat with all of our stuff. And within, it felt honestly, like looking back on it, honestly felt like a 5-minute onshore transition from the ferry and the WAS to now we're on this local fisherman boat, and next we're off on like a 4-hour boat ride around this around a beach as kind of a little bit of a cape on the island and around, and then we're spotting for our drop-off zone for this boat to begin the actual like human-powered aspect of the adventure. And yeah, once we jumped on the beach, waved our goodbyes to the local fishermen and strapped up all of our gear, and we were in for it. We kind of had a hodgepodge of gear. We all kind of put together what we could at home. We definitely didn't have like all the best stuff, but we did what we could with what we had. All of our packs, I don't think a single one of ours weighed under 100 pounds. And I actually have the pack that I used right here. This is a Mammut Try-On Spine. It's only 50 liters. That's kind of the biggest pack I had at the time, so I added a 35-liter pack to it and pretty much just used ski straps and cordelette to tie the two together. Thor also had a 50-liter plus some. Erich had an 85-liter. Rafa, I forgot, he also probably had like a 60-liter, 50-liter. But we were just kind of tying what we could together. And we brought 7 days of food, all of this camera gear, solar panels, some charging equipment, skis, obviously boots. We brought tent, we brought camping gear, ice climbing gear, all of these different essentials to pretty much trying to be as prepared as we could for one of these really all-around crazy adventures. And we walked on the beach, and still beautiful, gorgeous day. And I remember we got to this one, our first night, insanely beautiful sunset, absolutely incredible. And we all went to bed. We slept underneath the stars, and we were like, "Wow, this is unreal. This is crazy." And it was just a surreal experience. Took a dip in the water. Amazing. And then next thing you know, I think midnight 1 a.m., just a little bit of a drizzle, and then all of a sudden just a downpour of rain. And we it's so different to look at, but we were all sleeping under the stars the next, just like a mad dash to set up whatever we could in order to have some shelter from the rain, because we were just getting drenched. Thor just was like kind of one of those grosser moments, and I feel comfortable saying this because he's my brother, but like we set up these tents as fast as we could. We were all just soaking wet, sleeping bags soaking wet, sandy. We're on the beach, and Thor just like gets in his sleeping bag and just goes to bed. And it was like soaking wet, covered in sand, into a sleeping bag that you're about to be in for the next 6 nights. And it just seemed way gross to us. I don't know what, but apparently he liked it. But that was the beginning of being wet pretty much nonstop for the next 6-7 days. And the next day it was raining, and we made our way up. We waited for the tide to go down, made our way around this the beach through this different rocky section, and then started making our way up the river, where the rain just kept coming that day. We built a little shelter, and it was one of the biggest downpours I've ever seen. We were forced to stop our progress up the river and just build some sort of shelter, just because it was almost like to the point of just being unbearably wet. We imagine having wet boots and socks nonstop and still knowing that we were 1.5 days into the adventure. We really hadn't made it far relatively whatsoever. And that's where there was a little bit of a fire video in full circle. Erich was filming us just huddled together, absolutely wet, just immersed in one of the craziest different experiences I've had. But we were all at this campfire. We were just trying to figure out what was happening, and it was fun just to look at each other's faces, and the energy just built. It was one of those moments where it's like, it's super miserable, super uncomfortable, but I mean, we knew that, I mean, we're pretty much family, and it was, I mean, we didn't have another option. It was just, then it got to the point where it was like, man, yeah, we are suffering, but this is like fun. Like, why not, like, why dwell on the suffering and the being uncomfortable, and just really embrace it and be like, man, we're here together. We're friends on this adventure, trying to create these amazing new memories. Hopefully we look back on it and say that, wow, how funny, how wild was that? Which we do. Every time I look back at those moments, it was like, man, that was worth it. At the time, you're like, what the hell is going on here? Like, it's really unreal. But I think that our dynamic and our being like not only family but best friends and all really in it for the experience. We like, ultimately it was those memories that we could share and those stories that we could share for a lifetime together that were just holding everything together. It's like, no matter how uncomfortable it was, how much suffering we were going through, we had each other, and that dynamic was very strong, and our energy built and the enthusiasm built. And once one of us was feeling a little bit like, oh God, like I have this, then someone also felt that energy and like brought something up and told a funny story or turned on some music. And we tried to keep our energy as high as we could, because, I mean, there's so many people who go through different points of adversity, and for us it was really one of those times where it's like, well, we're all in the same boat here, might as well figure it out, because it's, I mean, we can't control the weather, we can't control the elements, like, might as well do with what we have. It is what it is. It is our new reality, and it was a lot of fun. We ended up having a break in the rain and started trudging up the canyon in the riverbed, and next thing you know, bounced into the forest, into the jungle where Rafa had went previously. And man, that was a crazy experience. Like, I remember almost immediately walking through and watching Erich just march through. We dropped off some of our gear, but we had A-frames with our skis and whatnot, with our boots, and we were just walking through, hacking our way through the jungle with the machetes. And yeah, like, one time Erich was walking, and all of a sudden his skis were just pulled directly out of his pack, so he just kept walking, and then there's just this A-frame of skis just hanging in these jungle, like, these jungle arms. And it was funny. It was really wild. Like, we were moving at about 100 meters or 330 feet an hour, just hacking our way through. And this is where the machete really came to play. Erich by far picked the best one, and we were stuck. My machete worked for the first few whacks, but it was so lush and so dense that almost immediately it was pretty much equivalent to me just banging other sticks with another stick. And it was just like trying to just break different weeds, and just super, like, I don't even know, like, it's hard to describe what it was like, but it was more of like just blunt force trying to make our way through. And yeah, you have no relative perspective of if you're going up or down or whatnot, because you're just going up. And one time we climbed a canopy, and we're almost at the top of these trees, and yeah, from like what it looked like, we were about 60 feet off the ground, but there was just so much forest and jungle underneath us, and so much life, and it was just absolutely amazing. But we came to a point in that little journey and adventure where we turned around, and we're like, well, honestly, if we want to get through this, we want to get to the Northwest Ridge. If we wanted to go as that initial route, because the Northwest Ridge, that the flank had the longest amount of skiing possible, but we soon realized that if we wanted to make it through the jungle, we would need about 3 days extra of food, and that we just didn't have that. So we ended up wrapping out of the jungle and then jumping back into the riverbed, where we dropped some other gear, and then we just started booking it up the canyon. And then it turned into a little more of a canyoneering. You're on lots of different loose rocks, mossy areas, avoiding the river, and we just really wanted to see that snow line. After a couple hours of trekking up the canyon, we finally, I remember looking at Erich, and we were elated. We saw our first glimpse of ability to reach that snow line and actually begin something that we're more more in tune and more of our element, which was skiing and backcountry and ski mountaineering. So once we saw that, we were elated. Like, hey, this is actually could be doable. There were points where it was like, man, we're wet, we're miserable. Like every morning you're sleeping in a wet sleeping bag, and then yeah, you may have a fresh pair of socks and just a couple pairs, but you put that on, you put your fresh socks on, and then you're still putting that foot into that really slippery and wet, gross smelling, just stench of a boot. And with it, you took a few steps, next thing your feet are just soaking wet again. So it was like imagining if you were going on a hike and you just like put your boots in a dishwasher, and then just every morning you just, like a really dirty dishwasher, and just had to walk just for miles and miles and miles without really any hopes of having things get dry. So that was kind of a gist of what that was like in just terms of pure wetness. But once we saw that snow line, we were like, wow, this could work out. And the weather was starting to break a little bit. These really ominous clouds were starting to just unveil this curtain of Corcovado, and that was a good moment. It was a really good moment. We ended up getting our gear ready, and woke up the next morning and began the climb. So for our camping setup, we had two different tents. There was like one 2-person tent and then another 3-person tent, and Thor and Erich mostly camped together, and then Rafa and I were in another tent. And I mean, it was an interesting thing, really looking for campsites and places where you could actually, peacefully sleep on flat ground that's not super rocky. Again, we're in a riverbed, so sometimes we camped like 100 yards apart. Sometimes we were just right next to each other. But it was a lot of it. It spent some time really trying to find that location of where to set up camp for the evening, make it a little bit as flat a ground as possible, and then pick everything up and do it all again. We did drop we dropped one cache on the way up, and we dropped one cache on the way up, and we pretty much we're just trying to bring the absolute essentials up the mountain, just to really. The packs were so heavy, and just also kind of, again, as I was saying earlier, a hodgepodge of stuff, and we tried to make do with what we had. So we set up camp. Let's see. Yeah, in terms of, there are any points in the trip that I felt like, screw this, I don't want to be here anymore. I don't know, like it was all one of those things that was a little bit unexpected. At the very beginning when I was in Norway and heard from Erich, like the depth of the experience couldn't set in, because it's like I wasn't totally aware of what would happen and whatnot. So once we were in there, it was kind of still this state of just really not really knowing what was happening, and it was just this really immersive experience where it was, at the time, it felt just so natural, but also you just really didn't know. It was a really weird paradigm that it's hard for me to explain, but when we were in the jungle, we did turn around and come back up and just try and figure out a new route. And I don't know if at any point I really thought, like, screw this, I'm done. Because ultimately it came back to just looking at our group and enhancing the pretty much the goal of having a strong team, and that team dynamic, and how important that is every time I look around and see like my best friends and my brother, and we're just like, man, we're all in this together, like let's figure it out. So that was always such a reassuring instance where you're like, man, if I'm getting down or I'm wet and I'm cold, it's always nice to look back at that community of people that you're around and be like, hey, there's a lot of other people who are suffering. Relative to us, and just that one scenario it was just our group, and we were really like we were all feeling the same thing. We were all soaking wet. It's like I mean, we could just constantly give excuses about how wet we were and how much we're suffering, but that wasn't the point. We tried to find those different silver linings and really jump on those. So overall, like, yeah, there were points that were definitely rough and uncomfortable, but I mean, when you're with people that you just love adventuring with and love to just to be around, that's really overpowered a lot of that other mess of just really crazy adventuring. Yeah, and as we went the skiing part, so we were really, really blessed with the one day of good weather when we made it up the river. I mean, we were getting these different satellite updates about weather and whatnot, and it would literally just show like a smiling sunny face or a frowny cloud with rain, and it was like really trying to find the happy medium there of like what, like, and also trying to mostly just trying to decipher what these emojis meant. And it was like there wasn't much of an hourly thing. There wasn't. We were just kind of like, well, today is going to be a sad cloud with some rain, so I guess we'll just prepare for the worst. We don't really know. But on the day that we finally reached the snow line, we were blessed with some amazing weather. We watched this curtain unfold and show Corcovado that evening, and that morning we got up and we just started. It was a beautiful day, clear skies, and after it had been raining for days, and it was again surreal. And I know that I've used that word quite a few times, but it was genuinely amazing. You're going up and it's a warm day in Patagonia. You're looking at this jungle and also this impenetrable jungle that we were trying to figure out where we stopped, then came around. And we were like, wow, we made it through maybe a fifth of that. So like crazy that just getting that relative perspective to what we were initially going through a couple days earlier. And then also knowing that we were all just making our way up this amazing volcano. And once we got to below the ice climb, we knew that this was we knew that it was kind of the highest skiable point for us. And from here we transitioned to ice climbing, and Erich was leading the ice climb, and then I was belaying him, and then we had Rafa and then Thor, and there's some amazing drone shots of kind of our dynamic of while we were climbing was Erich wasn't placing any screws because it was just so warm and so hot. And as the day progressed, it was just this heat was baking the ice. So actually, he was burying these pickets into all this rime ice and this different snow, just trying to get a little bit of that anchor. But as we moved up, Erich led all the pitches, and we were following. And Thor, like, there was a crazy scenario that Thor could speak more to. But yeah, Rafa, I was belaying Erich as he was leading the next pitch. Rafa would hold the drone out and fly from there, and Thor was like kind of puckered down with a hood over himself, just trying to look at the screen and see where he was going. But yeah, it was really wild. Once we look at that footage now, it's like, wow, that's pretty crazy. We were over this probably, 70-foot ice cliff heading into another little bit of a valley. So it's really wild to look back on. But being there again, we'd achieved our goal of, skiing from the highest skiable point, which was, we're skiers, and that's what we really wanted to do. The ice climbing got wild and just a little bit late in the day and turned around, and obviously, and there's a lot of more work in that realm of activity that we needed to get better at. Erich's been doing some ice climbing in Bozeman this last fall, but it just kind of understanding where your limits are is so important as well. So once we kind of realized that, we're like, man, it's getting a little bit late in the day, we had this turnaround time, jump back down, and like, well, now we got back down, rappelled safely, and put our skis on, and this is where things just like, I don't know, they just got way like a little bit of that butterfly feeling. It's like, man, now we're going back down the mountain, and now we're skiing like this amazing corn. Those were my favorite turns ever for that early in spring, in October. Those were hands down my favorite October turns of my entire life. And some of them, like, just all year round. absolutely amazing corn snow, skiing, like if you're looking at the ocean, the jungle, all this different, really powerful, just environment. And again, looking at friends, and Erich had like the biggest grin on his face. Thor was so stoked. Rafa was so stoked. We got down to the edge of the snow line, and we were just like all gave each other a big hug, and we were just like, I don't know. It was just one of those weird moments where it was just like, man, well, we did what we did, an aspect of what we wanted to do, and on our way out, we Rafa got on the sat phone a message that the local fishermen could only pick us up that day because there's another huge, like 5-day downpour that was heading in, much bigger than anything we'd experienced. And we're like, man, like we got to get out of here. So we grabbed all of our gear and just marched down the riverbed to get as far out as we possibly could, just to get to the beach. And it started to rain, like the overcast. You could just feel this weather, and the energy just started to blow in. And yeah, we barely made it to the beach on time. We saw right as we got out of the riverbed the little boat with the fishermen just floating, and the waves were starting to pick up, and the tide was rolling in, and all these different factors. And that's where some crazy photos that Erich captured, and crazy moments of us barely, like by minutes making on this boat before the waves just got way too unbearable and not possible. The local fishermen told us that if we showed up to that beach even 30 minutes later, they wouldn't have been able, it just wouldn't have been possible. They would have flipped and capsized just because the waves were picking up, and it's a small boat and their anchor couldn't hold them down. If we showed up 30 minutes later, they wouldn't even have been able to pick us up, and we would have had to just eat nalka, which is this celery type plant, for 5 days, because I think we had just a few more packets of top ramen left. But that was insane. Like it was that we. It was. I mean, we were moving a lot slower, but it was 6 hours on this boat back to the town of El Chaitan, and yeah, that was kind of a little bit of my perspective on it. There's so much more depth, and I would absolutely recommend watching the short film Full Circle, directed by Erich, and it was a wild adventure. It was produced by all of us. And I think that's one of the weird, not a weird thing, but that's one of the things that enhanced our experience, was looking back at that footage and seeing that it was produced by our collective crew while just trying to survive and be happy was quite impressive. And mad props to Erich for putting the whole thing together, and with Rafa and whatnot. And thank you, Benz and 111 Watches, for really supporting this film. And this film project, and without the idea and the team and support from awesome partners, wouldn't really be here sharing this story. So super honored and proud to be on that trip, and it was one of my favorite experiences ever with Erich, Thor, and Rafa. And just looking at a little bit of the gear. This was my moot shell that I used on that trip. It smells like absolute death. I had for boots, I used a Lupo Pro, like the factory edition, Dalbello. And then I had Vocal. I think I used my Vocal katanas on that project. But all around adventure, amazing adventure, and thank you 111 for supporting us on these amazing experiences that we can share for a lifetime. So I'll probably do a few more of these, I don't know, for other expeditions and whatnot, and just talking about gear and just different experiences. So thanks for listening to this drawn out conversation, and hope you watch the film and enjoy it. Looking forward to the feedback.